Templar. The Templar embodies the Protectorate's simple philosophy of war. Smash enemies with overwhelming force from an unassailable position. The strength with which the warjack wields its iron flails is such that the adversaries are hurled back, their shields smashed, and their hands and armor crushed. Even as the Templar beats down enemies of the faith, it advances farther into their midst with unstoppable wrath. Those lucky few who survived its initial onslaught are doomed to fall beneath its inexorable enforcement of the lawgiver's will. When former Hierarch Kaltor Turgus reunited the temple in 535 AR, he broadened the Protectorate's border and ordered the construction of the Tower of Judgment, with the first Templars created to guard this edifice. The isolation of the tower was such that the temple dispensed with the usual practices of convincing the Signaran authorities the warjacks were actually laborjacks. Freed from the pretenses, the Protectorate's artificers armed the Templars with simple but impressive weaponry, forever associating the warjack with defending the Protectorate's most important fortifications. Now Templars are a common sight marching among the crusading ranks of the faithful. And these things are pretty dang big for a laborjack. And I always found that interesting how they got around with the whole, oh, it's a laborjack, and then, they happen to have these ginormous weapons that only a warjack could use. And then Signar's like, oh, they must be right. Of course, I imagine a lot of coin and jewels probably persuaded a lot of, people that went to go check. But let's read over his stats, shall we? He is 12 foot 2 inches tall. He is 8.4 tons. He has a fuel load of 759 pounds. His initial service date was 539 AR. His general use is 4 hours. His combat use is 50 minutes. His armaments include a shield and a flail, probably because he is a laborjack, so they just, gave him the weapons he needed. His cortex was manufactured by the vassals of Menoth, and he is currently in production because when it's simple, it's easy to make, and these guys are usually always going to be made, basically. But let's go over his Mark III to Mark IV changes and see how much more damaging this simple laborjack is. And as mentioned before, he is huge. So his stat line, he is a speed 4, he is a mat 6, he is a defense 10, he is an armor 19. And he's pretty much just a very melee guy. He has all these standard abilities of a large warjack, which is slam, trample, and headbutt. And his special ability, which makes him useful to pull onto any army. Oh, also, he is one of the few Menoth warjacks that does not have immunity to fire. I imagine because they made him as a laborjack, that was not something that they could add on to at the time. But it doesn't make him any less efficient on the battlefield. One of his abilities that has lasted from Mark III to Mark IV is Shield Guard. And Shield Guard is always good to have regardless of who is next to him, because he can take some damage. He is a large warjack. Shield Guard. When a friendly model is directly hit by a non-spray ranged attack while within 3 inches of this model with Shield Guard, you can choose to have this model be directly hit instead, and that model automatically hit and suffers all damage and effects. The model can use Shield Guard only once per round and cannot use Shield Guard if it's incorporeal, knockdown, or stationary. Shield Guard can only be used once per attack. So this is still a useful hit because he is swinging at a good 19 armor, and he has a shield, so his armor is technically 21, making him even more chunky, and he is able to take a good amount of damage, maybe slightly less than a Kadoran warjack, but definitely worth its salt for a large warjack that he is. But let's go over to his weapons. He has a shield. So he's mat 6, range 1, POW 13 on that shield. Pretty good shield attack on there, which also grants him his +2 armor. And then his melee weapon is a flail, which is a mat 6, range 2, POW 17 chain weapon, so it ignores shields when you're using this weapon. So if anybody you're going up against has a shield, he just goes around it, so you're automatically just hitting their armor. And the special ability on this weapon, immediately after the basic attack with this weapon is resolved, during this model's combat action, the enemy model hit can be pushed directly away from the attacking model, and after the enemy model is pushed, the attacking model can advance up to 1 inch. And this is called beatback, in case I missed that in the beginning. And a beatback is very useful because it allows him to get further and further into enemy lines, and especially if he has, you line him up with some focus, you can push the enemy in, a good 3 inches, and then you move him up 3 inches, and thus getting him into the attack range of slowing down entire units or just anybody around him, because then he's kind of a problem when he's in the enemy lines. He is not a super complicated warjack for the Protectorate. He is pretty basic, but very, very useful, because sometimes simple is best. And anytime having a POW 17 weapon and a shield with shield guard in a army is always going to be useful regardless. And he's not the most expensive of the heavies, so if you want him, go grab him. He's going to be useful regardless. But